What's going on, guys? So I'd like to talk about HPPD. I had never heard the term almost 20 years ago, when I now know I did have it, or basically a traumatic psychedelic experience that left me with some emotional, mental trauma, and visual phenomena, which, looking back now, that was the least of it. But the constant visual issues is what triggered the anxiety. It reminded me of that bad trip. It reminded me I fucked up my brain or whatnot. But I guess I'll tell you how all this went down. When I was about 16, I acquired some really strong acid. Estimated 400 to 700 micrograms, because, well, several people took it that were adept psychonauts, if you will, that told me, well, yeah, dude, that felt like 3-4 average street hits. And in the 90s, a street hit was definitely, a tab on the street was definitely 100 mics, 90 mics maybe. And the cube I took had more than one drop on it. The guy I got them from dropped. Basically, when I bought a box of sugar cubes, and there was one in there that he said, that one's for you only. I made it extra strong because, back then I was taking a lot of acid, and I thought I knew what I was doing. In regards to strength, I thought I could handle anything. I was invincible. I was a teenager. So what happened was I foolishly did it at school. Set and setting was not even in my vocabulary back then, but I took half of it at the beginning of my brunch. Brunch was 15 minutes. Actually, it wasn't even the beginning of brunch. It was probably like midway through brunch. I bit it in half, and I put the rest back in the container that it was in. And I began to feel it within 5 minutes. I was walking back to class, and I was literally seeing fucking full-on visuals, full-on visions on the walls, just fucking fractals. Basically, I don't know if you remember the game Super Mario World. That was popular at the time, and I was seeing the ghosts that follow you, and then when you turn around, they stop. Seeing the giant ones, like neon fucking ghosts. It was crazy, awesome shit. I'm enjoying it at this point. I'm like, fuck. My balance was non-existent at this point. I was just tripping so fucking hard. It was within 5 minutes. I get to class. I sit down, planning to go on with my day and just, have it a bit more colorful, quite a bit more colorful. And I decide that I can handle more. So I decided to take the second half. Within 5 minutes of taking the second half, 10 minutes maybe, I am freaking out. I feel my body's completely melting into my desk. And I think that was the sensation that triggered a bad trip. I felt, no difference between my body and the desk. I was, you know what I mean? The boundaries were dissolved. Confusion set in, so just maddening confusion. And my teacher, I was looking at her, and she was spinning around like a top. she was spinning around like a top, and then lights started shooting out of her in random places. So it was like a top spinning with lights coming out of it. And I'd have to say this is probably within 30 minutes of taking the first dose, maybe less. And the sheer panic I was feeling was fucking enormous. It was horrifying. I thought I had done it that time, you know. I thought I was going nuts after this. This was it. My mind snapped. So I poked on my friend who sat in front of me. I poked on his shoulder. I was like, "Hey, dude, I think I'm fucking going crazy, dude. I took too much acid." And he kind of looks back at me and laughs his ass off. You know, we're kids. We didn't think anything of it. Like, it could cause any kind of severe trauma or anything. He's like, "Oh, well, you're fucked," you know? So I was like, fuck, he's no help. And I'm just desperate at this point to get something to pull me out of this the way I felt. No, you know what? I thought I was going to die. I remember distinctly thinking, I'm going to die. This is way too much acid. I've never fucking tripped this hard. And so I just, in a panic, get up, pack my shit, and fucking walk out of class. I try and I locate a few of my fellow trippers. Some of my friends took, while we were away from each other, we all took acid that morning, several of us, and I basically got together with them and took off from school. I had a lot of, it was square dancing that day, so I actually returned to school after cutting a period or two just to calm down, and I felt like I was able to get back to it. So I went to my PE class, and we had to do square dancing, and I remember it was in the gym, and it's like a big basketball gym, and I'm sitting there in the bleachers just while they're choosing our partners to dance with. Everything's just fractalizing and melting, and I'm like fucking in absolute awe. Long story short, I ended up with I was tripping so hard, I was just kind of sitting in the back, and I ended up with whoever, basically in high school, we all had our little crushes and whatever. I was just kind of hiding in the corner. I ended up with who I ended up with, and it was, probably not the most desirable girl, let's just say that. And I did my square dancing with her, and somehow I made it through. I don't know how. I was completely uncoordinated. I was so fucking, I was just tripping so hard. But by this point, I'm not having a bad trip anymore. I'm shooken up certainly. The anxiety has waned at this point, and I'm able to somewhat enjoy the trip. But lingering in the back of my head is, I don't think I'm going to be the same after what I just went through. Certainly traumatic. Anyway, I waited out, another 5-10 hours or whatever till I come down. School's over. I hang out with some friends at their house because I couldn't go home like that. It would just make matters worse for me emotionally. Hung out with my friends and ended up sleeping the rest of the trip off. But when I woke up the next day, I wasn't the same. I was dramatically changed. I didn't wake up happy. I woke up frazzled and depressed. Severely depressed. I felt different in a bad way. A lot of this is a blur, so all I can say was from that point forward, nothing looked like it used to prior to that trip. Physically, or visually rather, my vision was dramatically changed. Everything was neon and just like hurt my eyes. The world hurt my eyes to look at. I didn't like going out in public, or in the sun rather. It just felt, you know, different. I saw after images off things. I saw a visual static. The after images were pretty intense. I would look at something, look away, and it would still be there, all fluorescent, you know what I mean? Any image. It didn't have to be bright. So I certainly had the whole after image thing going. Things, colors bleeding, sort of. Visual static, real bad static, snow, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty bad. This constant visual overstimulation just reminded me of, I think it was, that created anxiety, and I believed I damaged my brain at the time, and I literally felt just different. I felt detached. I now realize I had depersonalization, derealization. I would be up at night, unable to sleep, just with anxiety of what I've done to myself for months. I had irrational fears that when I, you know, if I got a can of food out of the cupboard, I would have these. I would play out in my mind how someone in a factory, the canning factory, dropped LSD in the can just to fuck with me, you know, or to fuck with the food, and I happened to get it. I'd be concerned about LSD being dosed in the most, you know, impossible ways. I was, you know, just fearful of that. I completely stopped smoking pot. I couldn't smoke pot. It gave me more anxiety, more detachment, depersonalization. I began drinking a lot. That was the beginning of my drinking, like heavily. That was the only thing that seemed to help. The only thing that would get me to be able to relax at all and escape. That was a true escape from what I've done to myself at that time. I would stay up at night and think about how I fried my brain, how I was perma-fried, just like I was warned when I was doing acid. They were telling me, oh, you can end up perma-fried and all this shit, and I didn't listen, and look where I'm at now. I felt like these sensations, emotions of that my reality was synthetic. It was a simulation. Oddly enough, perhaps I was seeing the truth at the time, the actual reality, because that's what they're, you know, that's where science is headed now in regards to what reality is. But I was conditioned, you know, just like everyone else, that this tangible reality, this organic, you know, tangible reality we experience is solid and it is how it is, and that was just a shock to me, to my brain, to my mind, to the way I was perceiving reality. It was absolutely horrific. It was years upon years. It just wasn't going away. I was still had the visual phenomena. It was reminding me what I'd done to myself. I was just constantly depressed, anxious. I was withdrawn. And at this point, you know, it took, for years I didn't touch any substances except alcohol. And alcohol only because it just numbed me the fuck out. And drink myself to sleep. Some of the interesting phenomena that started happening to me after this was spontaneous out-of-body experiences and sleep paralysis at night. When I'd go to sleep, I could no longer sleep on my back because I would have these sleep paralysis episodes and strange, you know, out-of-body experiences. That was scary. I thought, you know, at that time, I didn't look into it as a spiritual phenomena. but as a brain damage phenomenon. I fucked myself up. This is all related to that fucking acid trip. It's been 20 years now. Just so you guys know, I'm fine. I just read something on Facebook. A friend of mine, her mother died, and there was a little meme post in the thread where she just, she was talking about, her mother's passing, and someone posted a meme that said, "You never really get over when someone dies, someone close to you dies. You learn to live with it, and you adjust to that." Something to that effect. And that's sort of what my HPPD had over time. I just got it. I mean, I was still anxious. I was still shooken up, like PTSD, like bad. And I remember it was like 4 or 5 years went by, and someone had mushrooms, and I had never done mushrooms at that point. It was just a whole fuckload of acid in my high school years up until that point. And I figured, well, everyone's telling me it's kind of like acid. I did a lot of research. I read up on what I've done to myself. I read up, finally, HPPD started becoming a term at that, an actual condition. I was starting to follow it. It's in the early years. There wasn't a lot of people with it, so I didn't have as many resources as there are now. There wasn't as much research into it as there is now. So it was very mysterious at that time. And basically, those stricken with HPPD were basically believed to be doomed. This is it. You're done. You're fried. But I read other things. I was reading up on mushrooms, and I can't remember exactly where it was or what it was I read, but I had faith that I would be able to do mushrooms, and something told me that if I did this, it would help me. Now, when that fateful day came, when I decided to do the mushrooms, I got an 8 from a friend, and I decided just to eat a couple caps and maybe a stem, just probably under a gram, maybe a half gram, just enough to get something off of it, some effect, but not a full-blown trip. So I ate them, and I did receive some effect, and in fact, at one point I thought it felt too close to acid to not be acid. I thought, shit, this is just some bullshit store-bought mushrooms with laced with acid. I feel just like I'm on acid. And then there's a panic in the background coming over me, and somehow I was able to just ride it out. And the way mushrooms affect you, the way they wear off, it's more gentle, it's not as stimulating, it's not as synthetic feeling, and it just sort of, it gave me that acid-like effect for a little bit, but the way it wore off was more gentle. And I realized when I came down, I remember I was by myself in the middle of the city. I threw my hands up when I came down off of this, and I said, I'm fucking cured. I am absolutely cured. I don't know what happened that night. It wasn't a lot of mushrooms. It was like that hair of the dog effect. You know what I mean? When you get too drunk one night, you have a shot in the morning or one beer, and you just feel better. You feel fucking, back on top of your shit. And after 4 fucking years or more, it may have been more than 4 years. That's just my estimate. It's been so long now that I just felt fucking emotionally cleansed, and it never went away. I felt dramatically better after that night it's like it reset me. It like hit a switch, and from that point forward, it was an uphill, you know, or rather, it was downhill. I just got better fast mentally. I was happy again. I was dating. I was, you know, back on top of my shit. And from that point forward, I was actually comfortable using psychedelics again. I've used acid since then a ton. Mushrooms quite a bit. You know, mescaline, other random psychedelics. I'm somewhat comfortable with pot again. I still get anxiety from it, so I'm not really that into it, but I can casually, recreationally use it if I feel like it, as opposed to before it would terrify me, bring a bad trip back. And I suffered from the classic flashbacks too, that you know, the PTSD kind. I'd be just sitting there with some friends, sober, and I'd have that feeling come over me again, and I'd start fucking flipping out. Like I remember a few times I just started walking into the middle of the street just to get away from this ethereal thing. It wasn't even something tangible. It was inside of me. This panic, this fear. I was trying to get away from it, and I would end up walking into the middle of the street and shit like that. I had probably half a dozen of those type of flashback / panic attack events. Every time I had one, I'd just fall into a deeper depression. Nothing felt real at the time. Constantly questioning reality. Not in the way I question reality now. I'm very philosophical, but then I was questioning. It was much darker. Let's just say that. So anyway, I had the mild mushroom trip. It reset me, and ever since then I had been doing LSD and mushrooms, and you know, I've had good times and bad times on them, but I come back. You know, at that time I didn't come back completely. So I'm just letting you guys know that I am 100% sure mushrooms cured me. You know, time heals a bit, but I was still traumatized. When I took the mushrooms, the bottom line is it reset me back to where I was before that. Now HPPD, did I still have the visual phenomena? That's the strange thing about HPPD, is it seemed to only be a problem when I had the anxiety, and I'd be dwelling on it. I'm pretty sure it did somewhat go away, most of the visual snow and all that, but it has increased over time because I continue to use psychedelics. However, it's not an issue anymore. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. You know, as you age, you lose your eyesight, you lose your hearing, your senses, they start to go to shit anyway. So I don't know if it's the HPPD, if it's a natural aging process, or both. My vision isn't what it used to be. My night vision sucks. I can still drive, shit like that, but I mean now, like I said, also I still use psychedelics, and I know they don't help your vision. It's just, it's quite obvious to me. There was a study back in I think it was the 80s or the 70s, where they took a group of people that previously used psychedelics. It could have been one hit of acid, it could have been 30. It was just a random, rather actually multiple uses. There was a group of multiple of psychedelic users that used multiple times, and then just one time. Actually, it was LSD specifically. So they had people that used LSD multiple times, just one time, and then people that have never used LSD before. They found that they did eye tests, and they were after images, or they would a light bulb would flash and then flash off, and then they would test how long it took the pupil to return to baseline. And those that have ever used psychedelics, it took a lot longer to return to baseline than those that had never used psychedelics before. All of them. I found the study through Arrowhead. It was a link from the LSD vault. So it isn't just some anti-drug propaganda shit. They did indeed find that psychedelics do affect the vision. So I feel like I'm digressing a bit, but the quote-unquote HPPD, my vision's different for sure. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't terrorize me, or I don't feel traumatized anymore. So that's the bottom line of that. So, you know, just do your research and make sure this is something you want to get into before you get into it. Other than that, psychologically, I'm fine. Other than, you know, the normal stuff people go through, I'm mentally stable, I believe. So, yeah, I just want to let you guys know with HPPD out there that it's not the end of the world, man. You'll get over it. Definitely get over it. It took me, you know, many years to, but I'm just letting you know there's hope. So, yeah, take it easy out there.